Webinar is now live. Hello, everybody. Come on in. Welcome. Let us know where you're coming from today. Happy Thursday. Hope everyone is doing well. Let us know how everybody's doing. If you are looking, I'm just turning on. I'm sorry, I haven't got the live transcript on yet. My apologies. It will be on here in just a second. There we go. So if you're looking for it, should be there. You can just click on the CC button on your side and you'll have it there. Hello, Nashville. We see West Virginia, Texas, Victoria, Maryland. Welcome, everyone. We're almost halfway through March, and we're almost to the year. Hello, Natalie. I'm excited to have you. We're just about to celebrate working from home, at least within Hi Mama. This is exciting. Hello. Wow. Guys, we're ready today. We're going to get started right at 2 today, folks. We have some great stuff to cover here. I'm very excited to welcome our special guests on. Hello, upstate New York, Utah. Yes, as always, Kai's right on the ball today, folks. As a reminder, the session is recorded. So if you do need to dip out for whatever reasons, life happens, it's not to worry. We will send you the recording tomorrow in the show notes with the slides and your certificate. So don't fret there. All right. Hello, New Jersey. Welcome, everyone. Let us know I'd love to know if anyone's already got the vaccine. I know there's been pretty big rollout in the States. I know here it's a bit slower, but we're getting there. Good. Most of the communities are getting obviously the folks who need it first. So first vaccine happened, both I see, fantastic. First shot happening for a couple of folks. It's a process, we'll get there one at a time. I'm so excited. This is fantastic to see how many folks are on that pathway right now. And hopefully we have a little bit more of normalcy coming to us in the very near future. So 2 or 3 more minutes, folks, we'll get settled in. Welcome everyone if you're just joining us. Hi, Lucinda. 2/3 of your staff have both doses. That's we're getting there. One of my friends who also works in one of our local hospitals, she's just had her first shot this week. And she said that as well, she got knocked off her feet a little bit there for a day. But c'est la vie, we're all doing this for, hello, Mexico. Welcome. You know what? Not everyone's keen about getting, no worries. We're in a place where safety of expression is here, but keep everybody calm. Okay. Hello, Texas, New Jersey. 2 more minutes, folks, and we're going to get started. Kaya's on the chat. Say hi to her. Hello, Puerto Rico. Welcome. Welcome. Hope everyone is ready. This is a hot topic, folks. Michelle, you got a sore arm for you. I feel like that's probably the most common side effect, at least in my mind. But usually when I get the flu shot, this is the same thing. I get a pretty sore arm for a day or 2, and then of course it calms down. So, Tanya, you have a headache. Yeah, I've heard the on the spectrum of symptoms when you get it, it's just I want to say it's maybe more harder hit flu-wise kind of situation. So I haven't had mine yet. I don't know yet. But hello, New York as well. Yeah, Kaya, great point. Please, if you guys have questions, please use the Q&A box for our special guest today. I'm excited. It's just the Q&A is a great way for us to just do a little bit more filtering. We're not worried about losing anything question-wise in the chat. As well, if you are in the chat right now, I highly recommend that you turn your settings to all panelists, all attendees. All you have to do is there's a little arrow next to all panelists. This way, everyone gets to see your comments, anything like that coming through. It's a great piece to use. I'm very excited to get started today. Yes, I feel like very much those days. I feel like we're all going to have these symptoms when it happens. So it's definitely a case here. All right, folks, we have a lot to cover. A lot. So we're going to get started. It is right bang o'clock, 2 o'clock here, Eastern Standard Time here in Toronto. Let's get rocking and rolling into our fantastic webinar series once again. As always, and I want to stress this quite a bit today, that we are not legal or financial or medical advice. Okay, folks, we do not want you to take away any, we want you to take away ideas. We don't want to take away anything that may not be relevant to you. So remember that if you are seeking any sort of advice of any kind, each situation is different, especially your own. So make sure that you are consulting somebody in your local area, especially when it comes to legal advice, because they know what's happening around in your area for laws just that much better. Okay, whether that be state or provincial. Okay, and licensing rules, you want to make sure, of course, that you're talking to your licensing rep, because they know your community the best and what applies to you. Okay, so especially last one, financial, if you're ever looking for anything like that, or medical advice, once again, it's to your area. I wanted to make that very, very, very clear today. Okay. Last but not least, you would not want me to be your financial or legal advisor anyways. It's just not my style. Miss Kaya, I'm going to bring you on here. Do your thing with our fantastic folks. We're going to do our land acknowledgement here.
Thank you so much, Ria. So before we jump into our presentation today, I do want to take the moment to acknowledge the land. So Hi Mama does acknowledge that our main headquarters is situated in Toronto, Ontario, on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto itself is a word that originates from the Mohawk word takaranto, meaning the place in the water where the trees are standing. As participants and guests in today's webinar, we're coming together from many different places all around the world. So we encourage you to learn about and to acknowledge the land from which you participate from. Moving into a little bit of diversity and inclusion, Hi Mama does want to reiterate that we are committed to fostering an inclusive and welcoming environment for our employees, our customers, and you guys, our community. Hi Mama welcomes and celebrates individuals of all backgrounds, orientations, and identities. Our Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee aims to ensure we provide a safe environment for everyone to thrive while bringing their authentic selves to work. Our mission is to promote an inclusive workspace for all employees through education, discussion, and celebration of our differences. Embracing these differences while coming together with a common purpose is what makes our team extra special. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaya, as always. Folks, housekeeping, if you haven't been with us, just in case, we've had so many webinars over the last several weeks, but we're always recording. So don't fret if you do have to leave, like I mentioned a little bit before, if you do have to leave, the recording will be sent out to you tomorrow. Usually by end of day tomorrow, you should see an email in your inbox. Please double check your spam or junk mail. Hopefully it doesn't land in there. It's coming from me. So please, please, please make sure to unblock that part. But we will also be sending out the certificate as well as a link to the show notes with you. So I'll be coming, so not to fret. If you are looking for the closed captions, please, there's a CC tab. You can turn those on, and we are recording with closed captions on. Last but not least, we know this is a very touchy subject for lots of folks. We just want to make sure that you are, please do not be hurtful within the comments or anything like that. We are open to our own opinions here, but we also want to keep our environment very safe as well. So please just work with us today on this topic. We know that some folks are not keen about the vaccine, and I'm totally cool with that. And there's lots of folks who have had it, as we've already seen in the chat. So we just want to make sure that everyone's just being respectful of opinions and everything today. Okay. Last but not least, if you are having any trouble, please do seek support.zoom.us. They're the best people. They know their product the best, and they can help you out. I'm sorry that I'm not that techie person. It's just not, I have husband IT for a reason. So a little bit about us. Welcome. If you've never been with us, this is I think we're on our 40th webinar today. I can't believe it, or somewhere around there. But it's kind of wild. So I'm Ria, I'm one of the early childhood educators here at Hi Mama. I'm also the community ambassador alongside my colleague Kaya, I can't believe we've had so many webinars over the past couple of weeks. Do you have any fun facts for us today?
Fun fact, it's super hot in Toronto today, like actually hot. It's like 10 degrees Celsius. So that was a definite fun fact, going for a walk and not having to wear a jacket. Super weird feeling, but I'm loving it. So if you haven't already, get outside.
I agree. Kyle will be in the chat, folks, so please shoot her questions, anything that's going on today. She's the person to go to. So please make sure to do so. I want to make a small intro before we dive in. I'm being very conscious of time. We have some great folks with us today. So we have Kennen, who's on with us. I'm going to give it over to him in just a minute or two here. But we also have Dorit coming from University of California, folks. I'm jealous because she's down in California and it's sunny and warmer than typically Toronto. But for the most part, we might be breaking records today. We also have Kelsey and Brandon on with us. So we have, Kelsey's coming here from CCPartners. Brandon's tagging along with him for the ride. He's his partner in crime. And we're gonna be talking with Dorit a little bit more about some of the things that happen in the US around their laws and regulations and things like that, about policies. And then we're gonna be talking with Kelsey and Brandon a little bit more on the Canadian side. But before we do that, I wanna hand it over to Kennen, come on and join us. Maybe before we talk a little bit more about viruses as a whole, especially a little bit more about COVID-19, maybe do you want to give us a small intro about yourself, maybe a fun fact or two, a little bit more about your background as a virologist, because I won't lie, I had to look it up myself when I found out you're going to be on with us. But do you want to start us out with a fun fact before we dive in?
Sure. I think my favorite fun fact about virology is that viruses have been with us since the beginning of time. And the amazing evidence of that is about 8% of the DNA inside of you comes from viruses. So you are 8% virus and you need them to function.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to give you control to dive in here. So just give me 2 seconds and then we'll jump back in with some open Q&A at the end with you. So
Cool. All right. I think I'm in. I've got control. I've got the power. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Anytime that I get the opportunity to talk about my personal love, viruses, I know a lot of people don't feel that way right now, but it's always exciting for me. And so I know there's a chance for Q&A, so I'm going to leave that open to get more specific into the virus that everybody really cares about, this SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19. And I'm going to start by just kind of introducing you guys to 3 very complex topics, which are virology, the study of viruses, immunology, the study of how our immune system or our body's defenses fight off infections. And then we'll wrap up a little bit with some vaccine development and understand how our immune system and understanding how that interacts with viruses actually helps scientists to keep us safer from these infectious agents. So a little bit about myself before I jump into this hefty topic. As I said, my name's Kennen. I'm a virologist here at Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. Virologist just means that I get paid to study viruses for a living. I am working on my PhD right now, so I study neuroinvasive viruses, particularly viruses that infect your nervous system and the brain, which is scary but fun, but all viruses I find very fun. There we are. Perfect. All right. So just a quick overview of kind of what I'm going to try to touch on. And this is a lot of information. So please feel free to drop questions in the chat if I'm moving too fast or if you want to get a little bit deeper into it. I'm more than happy to talk about this. But I'm just going to briefly talk about what a virus actually is and how it infects you in your body, and then how our immune systems respond to that and how we can use that to develop vaccines. So for starters, what is a virus? Turns out viruses actually aren't that complex. They're very simple in terms of all other forms of life and living things. And the easiest way to think about it is just kind of this infectious package of instructions. So infectious just means that it's able to spread from one person to another or one organism to another. So many viruses spread from an animal to humans, sort of like what happened with this coronavirus. We think it came from bats, maybe into pangolins, which are these weird animals, and then into humans. But they can also spread from human to human, as we know. But all they really are a set of instructions that tell the virus how to make more viruses. That's the only purpose of a virus. A virus isn't out to make you sick. It's not out to do some sort of nefarious things. It can't choose what it wants to do. It's kind of like a robot where it can only follow its programming. And its programming is just to make more proteins and more genetic material to make more viruses to go on and infect other cells. So it's made up of these 3 basic parts: the instructions that tell it how to make all the other parts to make more viruses. These instructions, though, are inherently pretty what's the word I want to use? They're not very stable. So there's a lot of things in nature that want to break them down. Sunlight, oxygen, in your body, you have lots of proteins that want to break down DNA or RNA, which is the form that these instructions come in. And so they need to be protected. So they're protected in this shell, which is made up of proteins. And then lastly, they need a way to get into your cells. So it should be of no surprise that evolutionarily, as we go along, your cells realize that they don't want to be infected by foreign DNA or RNA that's going to take control of them and infect them, so they have barriers. And so viruses have been evolving alongside of our cells, and in order to get past these barriers, they have these, what I like to call fake IDs or entry proteins. And so you may be familiar with this. We've heard this a lot in the news as a spike protein is what the SARS-CoV-2 virus uses. So the spike protein sticks on the outside, and it's kind of this fake ID that can trick the bouncers at the cell surface. The bouncer in this case is called ACE2 or angiotensin converting enzyme 2. And it tricks the ACE2 receptor into thinking that the virus belongs in the cell so that it'll let it in. And this ties into pretty much how all viruses that infect humans work. So you can break it down into 3 simple steps. You have attachment and entry. So you need those entry proteins, those fake IDs, to be able to find the bouncers on the cells that are going to let them in. And so this is why different viruses can infect different cell types, and you're not restricted. This is why HIV doesn't typically give you a respiratory infection, but SARS-CoV does, is because that receptor has to be expressed in the cells that it's trying to enter into. But once it finds the receptor or the bouncer that it can trick and let into it, then the virus is able to enter into the cell. And at that point, the cell is out of luck for most of the time. And so the virus is going to unleash its program, those instructions inside of there. And kind of like a computer virus, it's going to hack into the cell's machinery that the cell would normally use to make proteins to keep the cell alive. And instead, it's going to force that cell to turn into a virus-producing factory. So the cell's going to start making all of those pieces for the virus, which the virus will then assemble together, and then new viruses will leave. And so viruses are cool or scary, and the fact that they're different from normal living things where, one cell gives way to another cell, one virus entering into a cell can replicate and mass produce hundreds to thousands of new viruses, which can then leave that one cell to infect hundreds to thousands of new cells. So you can see how an infection can grab hold and take off really quickly. And this is a general process of how viruses infect us. So most viruses work this way. They just want to get into cells to make more viruses. As you make more viruses, they infect more cells, they spread to other people, and the virus has had kids and done its job. But luckily for us, we have our own body's defenses to fight against this. And so this is our immune system. And you can see from this diagram that the immune system is actually really complex. It would take hours to talk about all of the different parts of the immune system. But for a general breakdown, we can break the immune system into 2 basic parts. So we have our innate immune system, which you can think of as your frontline defenders. So these are non-specific. They just recognize anything that shouldn't be in your body and destroy it. So it could be a pollen grain that gets into you, a splinter, a virus, a bacteria, an infected cell. Your innate immune system doesn't differentiate between it. It just says something's wrong here, let's kill it. And it's pretty broadly destructive. So it releases a lot of these chemicals that kill a lot of cells around there, which is not necessarily good because not only is it killing the bad thing that's there, but also it can affect and kill some of your own cells. And so this is nice if you just have a short-term infection and you can get rid of it really quickly because you can replenish those cells. But if you have something like a virus that is able to infect cell to cell and stay around for a while, you don't want to just be killing all of the cells in your body. And so this is where our secondary part of our immune system comes in, known as our adaptive immune system. And our adaptive immune system, if our whole immune system is an army, our adaptive immune system is like SEAL Team 6. So it's very specific and highly trained to take out a specific target. And so we hear probably the most common part of the adaptive immune system that we hear in the media and everything are our antibodies. And I'll get into antibodies a little bit later to give a better description of that. But essentially your adaptive immune system will recognize the specific pathogen that's infecting you. So is it SARS-CoV-2, this virus that's coming out right now, or is it maybe the SARS virus or the coronavirus that causes the cold? It can tell the difference between those and make antibodies and weapons that can go and specifically destroy those in infected cells without affecting the rest of your cells. So your adaptive immune system is really good in terms of eliminating infections and targeting what should be targeted. And so you can kind of see there's a lot of crosstalk and complexity here. So I'm just going to give you a linear model of how an infection in your immune system typically responds. So you get these cells that get infected, and the cell's kind of screwed at this point. It's turned into a viral making factory, but all hope's not lost. It's going to release these signals called cytokines, which are kind of distress signals that say, help, there's an infection here. And these distress signals are going to recruit, there we go. They're going to recruit your innate immune cells. So these innate immune cells are going to pick up on these distress signals and say, something's not right, let's go and check out what's going on. So once they recognize that there's an infection here, these innate immune cells are going to recruit more immune cells, which are going to do two things. First of all, they're going to start gobbling up everything that shouldn't be there, whether those are infected cells, dead cells, or the virus itself. It's going to start picking them up, and then it's also going to start killing a lot of the infected cells that are around there. And as more of these cells rush in and more of these cells are dying, it causes a state that we refer to as inflammation. And a fun fact about inflammation in this process is actually it's our own immune system, and this inflammatory response is normally what we feel and experience as sickness. So as these cells rush in, your body's going to do things like raise your temperature, which is going to cause a fever. As more cells rush into that area, you're going to get redness because they travel through blood, and that's going to cause swelling, which can cause soreness. These cytokines, those distress signals, can cause you to feel achy, and your body's going to convert its energy into your immune system versus your normal processes, which can leave you feeling tired. So all of these symptoms, fever, swelling, soreness, aches, and pains, these are all actually signs that your immune system is working to fight off an infection rather than the infection is causing those symptoms. But while this inflammation is occurring, some of these innate immune cells are also going to be taking those viruses that they gobbled up and breaking them down into small pieces called antigens. And those antigens are going to then go and take to the adaptive immune system, that second part. And what they'll do is they'll present those antigens, those broken down pieces of the virus, to your adaptive immune system. And your adaptive immune system will start studying those and learning how they can build weapons against it. And the primary weapon being antibodies, which are produced by your B cells. So we've heard this term a lot, antibodies, but what necessarily is an antibody? Well, an antibody is this Y-shaped looking protein, and its job is basically to bind to an antigen. So your B cell will study what that piece of the virus looks like, and it'll make this protein that can recognize that part of the antigen. And this is going to allow it to bind anything that has that exact protein in there. So that's all an antibody really does, but it functions in two separate ways. The first, as I just mentioned, is, sorry, just a little bit of a lag. The first, as I just mentioned, is this binding process. And so it actually acts as a marker. So it's going to, anything that it binds to, it's going to serve as a flag to say, hey, this is an infectious agent. This shouldn't be here. We need our innate immune cells to come in and destroy this. So this is nice because now your innate immune cells that are normally blind and nonspecific have targets, so they can specifically destroy things that should be destroyed and not destroy as many of your cells that are just innocent bystanders. So your antibodies are going to act as these flags, these markers for things that shouldn't be infected. So you can see here that they can mark, if you have antibodies against the spike protein, which is that entry protein, right? You can use it either to mark the virus as it leaves cells, and that can sequester the virus and you can destroy the virus before it gets into new cells, or infected cells are also going to release some of these viral proteins. And so you can mark those infected cells for them to get destroyed. The other thing that these antibodies do is you may have heard of the term neutralization or neutralizing antibodies. And this happens when you get enough antibodies that are just coursing through your body and your bloodstream that they can actually completely bind to the virus and block all of the spike proteins or all of those entry proteins, which blocks the virus from even being able to get into cells. So if you have enough neutralizing antibodies, say 100 viruses get into you, all 100 of those viruses will be sequestered and clumped up by those antibodies, which blocks them from ever being able to get into a cell, completely neutralizing them as a threat until your innate immune system can come and gobble them up and destroy them. And so together, these antibodies in your adaptive immune system work with your innate immune system to mark and destroy all of the infection until eventually you resolve your infection and you're all good to go. And so this is just a really rough chart of how this works. So as soon as you're exposed, as soon as the virus gets into you, your innate immune system instantly kicks on and starts destroying what it can. And the purpose of this is to slow down the ability of the virus to start replicating and growing out of control. And it's to buy time for that adaptive immune system, which happens a little bit later, to kick in. But as you can see from this chart, the problem with that is that the adaptive immune system, it takes time. So it normally takes about 5 to 7 days for your adaptive immune system to kick on, which is time for the virus it to be producing and potentially causing damage, whether that's directly through killing your cells or indirectly through misregulating your immune system and causing your own immune system to hurt you. And so this is where vaccines come in. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to make that adaptive immune response kind of kick on faster, right? What if we could make this response, which you see as soon as it starts to happen, that's when our viral load goes down. What if we could make that happen faster? And so vaccines do this through a technique that we call priming. And so they are going to train, they're going to train your immune system so that they can respond and react a lot faster. And the way that this works is, as we just discussed, the first time you're exposed to a virus or an antigen, it takes a while for your adaptive immune response to kind of hit that peak, right? It takes about 5 to 7 days and then it starts boosting up. And that's not great because that's the more time that it takes, the more time there is for a virus to potentially do damage. However, our immune systems are amazing and they have something called memory. So once the first infection is cleared out and we have all those B cells that made antibodies and T cells that can destroy them, those cells don't just go away. Instead, some of them will hang around. Some of those cells that remember how to fight that specific infection will just stay around in your body patrolling, which means that if you ever get exposed to that infection for a second time, instead of having to go through that whole process of your innate immune system capturing the virus, breaking it down, taking it to your adaptive immune system, the adaptive immune system having to learn, instead, you just go, hey, B cell, remember when you fought this? And it goes, oh yeah, totally, I've got the antibodies already, and it can instantly kick it on. So you get a response that looks like this. So here is where you get infected, and all of a sudden you can see super early, you get the same type of response that you had from the original infection to clear it at a much earlier time point. And not only that, but the cells are already there, so they can expand a lot quicker to give you a lot stronger response, which can help to eliminate the infection even faster. And so that's what a vaccine does, is instead of you having to be infected with the virus for the first time, because this is what naturally happens anytime you're exposed to any type of pathogen. As a kid, you eat dirt, there's bacteria there, you build up immunity to the bacteria in the dirt. But we don't want you to have to risk getting sick. And so a vaccine gives you just a part of that antigen, so a part of the virus, whether it's a weakened form or one of those proteins like the spike protein, and allows you to build that natural immunity, that same response that you would normally get from an infection, except for in this case, you don't have to worry about any viral induced damage happening in the background. There's no race to build antibodies because you're gonna be losing cells. Instead, it's a safe way to develop these antibodies so that if you ever do see the virus in real time, you're gonna get that rapid response so you can quickly eliminate it. So I like to think of vaccines kind of as target practice. And there's a lot of different methods for designing vaccines or delivering that piece of the virus that we want it to be exposed. So most commonly, we have up here, you see live attenuated vaccines. This is what our chickenpox, our measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines. So these are actual viruses that have just been weakened so that they can't do a lot of damage. So they provide, it's like a practice squad for your immune system. We also have killed or inactivated viruses, which is you take the virus and you kill it so it can't do anything. And then more recently, we've been hearing a lot of stuff about like RNA viruses or viral vector viruses, which is how AstraZeneca works, or RNA is how Moderna and Pfizer's work. But the thing about all of these delivery strategies, these are all ways to get that little piece of the virus delivered, is so that your immune system can build up its response. So even though these strategies might be a little bit different, the way that they work are all the same. So this is why when a lot of people were really worried about the mRNA vaccines, I kind of equated it to a new iPhone coming out. When a new iPhone comes out, you don't start questioning if this new iPhone is dangerous or if it's going to work and then pick up calls and take pictures, because you know that the old iPhone worked and the new iPhone is just a different version of this to do the same exact thing. And that's how these vaccines work, is they all work through the 100 years of vaccine technology that we have. They all work the same way to stimulate your immune response, to build antibodies and make those memory cells. And so I think for the sake of time, I'll skip over that. I can definitely answer questions later about how vaccines are actually made and how the purpose works. But the major benefits for all of this, as we've talked about vaccines, is the vaccine allows you to naturally build that immunity, that same type of immunity that you would if you were naturally exposed, except for in a safe environment, because there's no infectious virus that's going to be there destroying your cells and changing the way that your biology works. On top of that, on top of building natural immunity and not having the danger of viral induced damage, it also gives you that nice immunity so that the next time that you're exposed to the virus, you don't have to have that slow lag time and you can quickly eliminate the virus, whether that is by having neutralizing antibodies so you don't get infected at all, or just being able to quickly call up those memory B cells and T cells to destroy the virus so you're sick for maybe 24 hours versus a week. So that's a really long crash course, or a quick crash course into basic virology, immunology, and the science behind how we develop vaccines. I'd love to take any questions that you guys have.
Kennen, that was absolutely fantastic. I learned so much. Like I was just sitting here, I was like, just keep going. I'm just learning away over here. First of all, a couple of people in the chat have been telling me same thing, just so you know, if you didn't see it, the same thing. We have tons of questions. Obviously, folks, we won't be able to get to all of them, but let's maybe start with the first couple. We had a couple who came through earlier with us through our social media, and maybe you can speak to those a little bit to start. So you had mentioned this before a little bit about like long-term effects of vaccines. I know we've been talking a little bit about, especially COVID-19 and what it's been bringing along. Can you maybe speak to the long-term effects of the vaccines that are out there right now related to COVID? Is there like, will we be looking at getting boosters even? Like, do they work for that long, or is it similar to like MMR and we're having to look at getting a booster every 10 or 15 years, whatever the time frame is?
Yeah, that's a big outstanding question in the field. The cool part and the worst part about science is that you're working at the forefront of knowledge. And so this virus just came out a year ago. We're just reaching the year mark of lockdown here in Chicago, where I'm at. And so it's not like we have 5-10 years worth of data to say how long these vaccines will last. So it's hard to say. Normally when I answer that question in terms of will we need boosters, will it be like the flu virus? First of all, it's different from the flu virus. The flu virus, when it's doing that replication portion in the cell, it makes a lot of mistakes, which allows it to mutate really quickly. So essentially we have 5 to 20 different flu strains that pop up each year, which is why we continually need new vaccines. It's not we're fighting the same virus, we're fighting multiple versions of it each year. Coronavirus doesn't mutate that quickly, which is really nice. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that we won't need boosters regularly like the flu vaccine, but it is possible. We'll only know with time that maybe you'll need a booster 2 years, 5 years, or maybe once every 50 years. I think the main thing, I don't like shots as much as other people, but the main thing is just that we have these vaccines that protect you from having the real long-term effects, which are scary to me, are what the virus causes. So we've seen people with long hauler syndrome. ACE2, that receptor that it uses, is actually expressed throughout your entire not only your respiratory system, but your cardiovascular and circulatory system. So we've seen people who've, and in your brain, your GI tract. So we've seen a lot of long-term and strange side effects from the viral infection that worry me. So I'm happy to have vaccines that you don't have to worry about that.
That is fantastic. Kennen, I'm going to ask you, just for sake of time, I'm going to pop in one more question here, but as well, Kaya has popped in the chat. If you guys want to follow Kennen on social media, I'm sure that's a great way to connect, learn a little bit more with him and on his Instagram. And I won't lie, I followed you and you're my first person that I followed on Instagram because I just got Instagram. It's so bad. So anyways, last question here. And a couple of people have asked about if they have like a lower immune system to start with, does the vaccine, like how does that affect people who maybe don't have as a great of immune system as other people do?
Yeah, that's a very great and very specific question. Depending upon how your immune system is maybe being attenuated or weakened, it's going to determine the robustness of your immune response, right? So if you have a vaccine, unlike a drug, so let's say if you're diabetic, you take insulin because your cells don't take up sugar, and the insulin will force your cells to take up sugar whether they want it to or not. A vaccine doesn't work like that. A vaccine just uses your natural body's defenses. It essentially mimics a natural infection, so you build natural immunity. So if you have a weakened immune system, unfortunately, the vaccine can't force you to have a strong immune response. So whatever your immune response is going to be mounted, that's what you're going to get. And at this point, that's where I say I can't give medical advice. So it's always best to talk to whoever your specialist is about the best way. It could be maybe pursuing multiple boosters, or it could just be maybe keeping an eye out for how your immune system is responding to that.
That's totally fair. And I agree 100% with the, talking to your personal physician, and they know you best, they're able to give you that more quality answer. But on the same side, you've been extremely informative. Everyone's loving you in the chat. Even Dorit's on the chat telling you she's following you on Twitter now. Kennen, I'm going to kick you off, but I want to invite you to follow along with us after for a more open Q&A, and I'm going to invite Kelsey on. But thank you so far for absolutely everything you've done, and that great overview. It was absolutely fantastic. So
thank you.
Yeah. All right, Kelsey, I'm going to bring you on. Please join us here, folks. Kelsey's coming from CCPartners Ontario. Welcome. I love having a fellow Canadian on, but I love having everybody I actually get on here. But maybe, Kelsey, if you want to start us off with maybe just a little bit about yourself, maybe a fun fact or two, and maybe a fact just a little bit more about your background.
Sure. So, I have to echo what everybody else is saying. I learned a ton, and I would love to have Kennen be able to come talk to all of my clients so that they can help share information. Because I think, all things aside, people need the right information, and they need to be able to take that in to make the right decisions. And that's what we're trying to do today. So I'm super happy to be part of this and part of this discussion. I am not going to be able to share some amazing slides or amazing information, but hopefully I can get people asking the right questions. In terms of my background, I grew up around labor relations, so I kind of always had it in mind. And I've been working with childcare and not-for-profit for most of my, 17 years in practice. So the last 15 at CCPartners, I've been working a lot in the childcare sector. So long before I had any kids of my own, I was acutely aware of what's going on in this sector. A fun fact about me, I guess, as some of the people on this chat will know, in my spare time, I enjoy both brewing and sampling beer. And so, yeah, in terms of what's happened over the pandemic, the pivoting from all of the breweries, as is with every industry, has been awesome for the ability to do that in the downtime, because you can get beer delivered from just about anywhere now. So that's my fun.
Very true. That's a fantastic fun fact. I love that. That's absolutely amazing. Yes, Kaya's mentioned, we're shifting gears here, folks. So Kelsey, we're going to tip it off with you. We want to talk a little bit about the legal side of this. Obviously right now we're talking a little bit more Canadian. We're going to talk American a little bit, but let's talk about workplace policies in Canada. Obviously a little bit more about childcare specifically. I know it's been thrown out. It doesn't matter what workplace you're in right now, about potentially having a workplace policy for vaccines or having them regulated. Do you think centers or places should potentially, if they don't have one already, have one created or start creating one? And maybe what would be some tips around getting that set up for them if they haven't already?
Sure. Well, I think it's important to start from the kind of big picture context of, is there something out there that definitively says employers, yes, you can mandate this, the use of vaccine in general, or force vaccinations, and unfortunately, because it would be very easy for us to then provide advice, there's no settled case law with respect to, yes, employers across the board can have vaccination policies and they can't be questioned, or no, they cannot. As with many things in law, and especially when it comes to the employment relationship, it's all about context. So, for our context here today in the childcare setting, we're kind of, it's not frontline healthcare the same way that a hospital or retirement home or long-term care home might be, but at the same time we're talking about what they generally group as a congregate care type setting, with a lot of contact and a vulnerable population. And what we look at is some of the historical precedent or kind of analogous situations. So under the CCEYA, for those of us not in Ontario, that's the legislation that regulates childcares in Ontario. Immunization for certain things, including is an included requirement for employees. So that kind of gives us a little bit of background saying, okay, well, it has been recognized that in this sector, there are times when immunization is absolutely a valid requirement, right? So getting back to your first question, should employers be having these policies, or at least thinking about them? Absolutely. Again, if we had a directive from the Ministry of Health, whether you're in Ontario or any other province, that said these vaccines or vaccination is mandated for anybody in these industries, it would be very easy, right? But we don't, and so we have to consider our own individual context. Absolutely, I think every employer should be at least discussing the merits of a vaccination policy. And in the childcare sector, I mean, almost without a doubt, I'm sure that all of you have had questions from parents already. Are you going to be forcing employees to get it? Does my kid need to be vaccinated to be able to come? Are parents going to be allowed on only if we've got vaccination? So you need to be aware of these issues and certainly starting to formulate your policy if you don't already have one.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think the conversation's already probably started if it already hasn't been. It's definitely a really big piece of conversation, no matter where you are, but especially in childcare right now, as we start to roll out vaccines, at least here in Ontario. I know it's a bit different depending on where you are. What about, let's say a center does have a policy set up? I know, of course, we can't get into the specifics because it is specific to each person and their employee and their employers. But what rights do employees have if, let's say, they're not keen here to potentially get the vaccine, and or if they don't have a policy in place and they do want to get it, but others don't? Is there maybe some thoughts around how this could pan out for centers, and maybe how having that policy is probably a good idea at this point right now?
Sure, and there's a common a common theme when adjudicators, whether it be in a unionized context, a labor arbitrator, or a court or a tribunal, looks at a policy from an employer to determine whether or not it's reasonable. And they have to, for a policy to be considered valid, it has to be, not unreasonable. It has to be consistent, with the terms and conditions of employment. It has to be clear, and you have to bring it to the attention of the employees, not just what the policy is, but also what the consequences of not adhering or following the policy could be. So in the context of a vaccination policy, from leaving aside whether or not, the kind of two questions, right? The one question, can you, employer, mandate that people get vaccinated? Is that a reasonable policy? And then the second question is the way, let's assume for a second that we can mandate it. If we can, we still have to make sure that our policy takes into account certain aspects of, what the legal framework allows for employees and employers in Canada. So in that regard, if you don't make any, exception or recognition of human rights or medical exemptions, your policy is going to fail. So even if it's ultimately decided that, yes, employers have the right to mandate vaccine, and you as a childcare center say, okay, everybody has to get it now, and somebody says, well, I can't because my religion doesn't allow it, and you say, too bad, you're fired, that's not gonna fly, right? So religious exemptions and medical exemptions or accommodations are necessary. The other part of the kind of reasonableness of the vaccination policy, and here's where we kind of start talking about a little more, specific application, is what happens if the employee chooses not to vaccinate? So, to your question of what rights do employees have, certainly we can't force everybody to, get a needle in their arm. If you don't have a valid religious or medical exemption, or I can't think of any other possible exemption under human rights legislation that wouldn't apply. I mean, creed generally gets lumped in, at least in Ontario, with religion, but it's not necessarily exactly the same. But absent any of those, kind of human rights protected grounds for an exemption, if you as an employee choose not to, what are the consequences? And that again comes back to, is your policy reasonable? Well, in the circumstances, kind of the way we see it right now is you can't just fire someone for not getting the vaccine. That to me seems unreasonable, at least at this point. Again, we don't have case law on this because this is so new and different. And I can touch on what the case law does tell us in a little bit, but instead you have to say, okay, well, if someone refuses, and this is, kind of the opposite side of the coin, what employee advocates and or unions are kind of espousing as principles is, okay, if you're going to have a policy, employer, then you got to make sure that people who choose not to are aware of what the consequences are, and they should be able to access either, an unpaid leave but not lose their job for it, or exploring whether they can work from home or what the other options might be. But don't just jump to, you don't get vaccinated, you're fired. And that's regardless of where you agree on the finer points. Certainly that's something that I would advocate in terms of any discussion I'm going to have with an employer. We're going to start asking those questions. Okay, well, if somebody, what do you propose to do if your employee says, I'm not going to get the vaccine? And let's talk about what's reasonable and what's available. Now, specifically in the childcare setting, it's tough to have people work from home because childcare happens, in the facility. And there's a reason for that. Is because that's what your clients need. They need their kids to be somewhere else. So it's kind of limited opportunities when we're back in a full childcare, operational mode, unlike when childcare was shut down, limited opportunities to work from home. So then you get into questions about, okay, well, can you have, access to some of your entitlements, whether it be vacation or sick days or those kinds of things, so that you're not without income. Those are all questions that are specific to each particular childcare center, whether they've got, policies with respect to leaves of absence, whether they've got a collective agreement that speaks to this kind of thing in a unionized context. But again, stressing that any policy you have about vaccination has to not only make allowances for those human rights accommodations, but also address what happens if somebody does refuse.
I think that's probably the biggest key takeaway is making sure that you've thought the whole process through, and that you do have, like you said, that you have the case scenarios for both sides of the coins, if they take it, if they don't take it, and then what's the next step from both of those areas, and just making sure you've created a very thorough and it's a thought out policy and plan. And of course, maybe seeking a little bit more legal advice if you're maybe confused or not quite sure where to go. So
yeah, exactly.
Kelsey, thank you so much. I'm going to bring you back on in a couple of minutes for open Q&A, but I've learned a lot so far. I've learned probably more in the last 40 minutes than I think I have all day today. Thank you so much. Like I said, we'll bring you back on. I have a couple of great questions that are Canadian related questions, but right now I want to bring Dorit on. She's coming from California. Like I'd mentioned, I was a little jealous. She's down in California where it's generally warmer, sunnier. Maybe not today, but you're a professor down there. maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit about what you do, and maybe a fun fact or two as well.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Dorit Reiss. I'm a professor of law in California. I got into vaccines as a mom, and I've been writing and reading about vaccine law and policy broadly. And most recently, the employment context is where everybody has questions. So that's what I've been writing about. As to fun fact, there may be a 10-year-old that comes around from the background. So I apologize in advance if that happens. And I too have been learning a lot, and I appreciate you bringing this.
I'm so happy everyone that we have on today could be here. Dorit, let's talk a little bit about the states, a little bit more specific for our folks who are coming from down there. Of course, very similar here in Canada. I'm sure we're asking maybe even the same questions almost in some context, but maybe a little bit more, let's talk childcare, of course. Should centers down in the States, what are they looking at for policies around vaccines if they don't have one already? Or is there anything that centers should be thinking about as they do ask maybe centers, staff to get it or not get it, whatever it is they work at? Where's the starting point for our friends down in the US right now?
Great question. So I'm going to repeat some of the ground that Kelsey has covered. The starting point in the United States, as in Canada, is if we don't get ahead of this virus, it's going to overtake us. We've learned that in this year. We can't just sit and wait for it. The other starting point is that anyone who's running a workplace has, among other things, a duty to provide a safe workplace. And if you're working with children, a duty to provide for the safety of the vulnerable population you're handling. The other starting point in the States is that I think workers have a lot less protection than in Canada. In the United States, employment is at will, and generally your employer can determine workplace conditions with some limits, and we'll talk about the limits in a moment. So generally, a workplace can require a vaccine as a workplace safety and health condition. And again, there are some limits, and I want to mention them quickly before I think you'll ask me about the rights of employees. In the United States, there are 4 limits to the ability of employers to require COVID-19 vaccines. First, unlike regular vaccines, these vaccines are now under an EUA. I've heard that might change for the Pfizer vaccine, that may be licensed in the next few months, but right now it's under an EUA, and there's a legal question: can you mandate a vaccine under an EUA? And the law isn't clear. Maybe, but we don't quite know. Second, if you have a unionized workforce, the collective bargaining often required negotiating with the union before imposing something like a vaccine requirement beforehand. And that's going to depend on your specific collective bargaining agreement, and that's where you need to look. Third, everybody that has more than 15 employees, so any medium to large daycare, is subject to the American with Disabilities Act. And that means that if an employee has a medical reason not to vaccinate, a medical contraindication, you have to accommodate them unless it's a really high burden. Now, accommodation doesn't always mean you treat them the same. It might mean you say you can come to work, but you have to wear this extra PPE where everybody who can get the vaccine doesn't have to. Kelsey already mentioned that although in some workplace working from home might be an alternative, it can get tricky in the childcare setting. But if an employee has a medical reason not to vaccinate, they have a legal right to be accommodated with very few exceptions. And finally, under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, if you have more than 15 employees, if an employee has a sincere religious objection to a workplace rule, including a vaccine, you also have to accommodate them, but the burden there is lower. If it's more than minimal burden, more than minimal cost, you may not have to accommodate the employee, which I think suggests that, going to Kelsey's point, that protection of religious objections are lower in the United States. In all cases, remember, workplaces can tailor the requirements, and I agree with Kelsey that a vaccinate or fired approach might be not the best starting place right now. You can say vaccinate or continue to mask or continue to have to wear gloves. You can adopt an incentive approach. Those that vaccinate get extra payment or extra sick days or something else. And that might be another alternative to requiring vaccine. Now ask.
All right. Well, that's fantastic, Dorit. Yeah, I could see how there's some similarities, of course, yes, between Canada and the States. I'm sure there's some parts that are very, very much the same. I wanted to pop in a little bit more about the Center for Disease Control. They put out the workplace vaccination program. Could you maybe give us a highlight of what that is, a little bit more about it, what does it do for centers? Maybe is it impacting us at all? Not really. What's it like?
So probably not much. So under the US law, as it relates to giving health workers health insurance, you can provide a wellness plan for your employees, in which if something is a wellness program, they get discounts in their health premiums and they get some other incentives. So basically the CDC program is a workplace incentive. It's probably easier for a healthcare provider than a daycare, because one way to do this is to provide vaccine on site, which may or may not be an option for your audience. But mostly it's an incentive program that allows you to provide vaccines to your workplace. It comes with some limits. So under the American with Disabilities Act, if you do a workplace program like that, you have to put in place some privacy protection for your employees. But other than that, if you can do it, it's a way to offer incentive to vaccinate.
Okay. You guys have been absolutely amazing. I've learned so much about the Canadian and the American law system, not so much, but a little bit about it. I want to open up for some more Q&A, because I am being conscious about time and where we're at. Dorit, I'll start with you because you're here, but Kennen and Kelsey, if you want to come on back and join us here, I'll start with you. Dorit, can employees be asked or forced to come to work in person if they refuse to take the vaccine, and they do not have a medical or religious reason not to take it?
So to echo something that Kelsey said, you can't go to the worker's employee and drag them to work. You can't force them to vaccinate, but you can say, if you don't want to get the vaccine, you may lose your job, up to and including losing your job. Might not be a good idea, but the employer can't say that unless they have a valid exemption. And you can say, I'm prioritizing for in-place work, people who have gotten vaccinated, and there may be a job cost, for example, less opportunities to advance to people who aren't doing that.
Awesome. Dorit, before I let you go, I always like to wrap up with, do you have any last thoughts or words of wisdom or happy thought for the audience? You've been absolutely fantastic with us today. Any last words from you about, as we, mass rollout is really started in both countries and many countries around the world, but is there anything you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, as you're saying, COVID-19 has been a bit of a national trauma, I think, for everybody. It's overturned our life. It makes things hard. The vaccines are actually a good thing. They're a way out. So when we start talking about mandates, everybody kind of, oh no, the bad rules are coming. But the fact that we now have the vaccines offers us hope that we can go back to a more normal thing. That's a good thing.
Dorit, thank you so much. Kelsey, I'm going to bring you back on here. I have a question for you before we also jump into some wrap up, but do you think, and Dorit as well, feel free if you want to jump in after this guy. Do you think that if a center has a general policy around in their parent handbook indicating that the staff are not mandated to get the vaccine, do you think centers should have that here in Ontario, just so parents know? Maybe what's your thoughts around that?
Excuse me, I think it's important, the communication. So I saw the question in the chat and kind of typed out an answer as well before. I had said, oh, we'll have them answered live. So I apologize for that. But it's, communication, right? Like we said before, everybody needs information to be able to make their own decisions. And so not everybody can just call up Kennen and say, hey, Ken, what's happening with this? What should I do? It would be amazing if we all could. But in terms of, figuring out what you want to communicate to parents, first, you've got to figure out what you're going to ask or require of your employees. And then, like in any business, you want to reassure your customers, but especially here because of, our customers and our clients are small children, right? Are the parents of small children, and the small children are the goods. And so they need to be, those parents need to be assured that whatever the kind of maximum safety measures are being taken, and at the same time, you can't trample on the rights of those employees. So, it's a balance, right? But I think some kind of communication is important, whether it's a memo, because we see, for instance, in the Ontario rollout of the vaccination kind of scheduling, right? They've got childcare listed in that phase 2.
Yes.
Right? And so there's still a bunch of time before that happens. So we may see additional developments in terms of, does this get added to the list of immunizations that are necessary under the CCUIA, and if so, what does that mean? And that's the context in which I'm starting to get questions asked after those announcements last week, right, of the kind of redesigned vaccination rollout. So it's gathering information and then communicating that information clearly to the parents is absolutely going to be important. Is it premature a little bit right now? If you're making a blanket statement, it might be premature. But if you're talking about, hey, we're gathering information and we're going to do everything we can to, as we always have, to keep your kids safe. And I think, the data and the numbers from daycare and from the childcare setting have indicated that by and large, everybody's doing an amazing job of keeping their employees and their kids safe. And that's a testament to every childcare operator and ECE out there who's working hard to stay safe and keep everybody else safe.
I 100% agree with you completely. And you've getting as well, a lot of people are thanking you for that answer, by the way. So before we jump to Kennen, I just wanted to give you a chance. Is there any last pieces of advice, words of wisdom you want to leave the crew with today? Oh,
sorry. Yeah,
it's okay.
No. I think it's like, gather the information and make sure that when you communicate, you're communicating clearly, and don't make any knee-jerk reactions, like I wrote in the answer. Right? Get some advice, get the information, and be open to discussion, so that instead of just arguing with people, you can help them learn whatever they need to learn to make their own decisions as well.
Awesome. Kelsey, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today, being a bit of a voice for our fellow Canadians here. And Dorit, thank you very much for being a voice in what's happening going on in the States. This is a very, I want to say, just overwhelming topic right now. And of course, people are trying to do their best. And I can 100% echo what you said, Kelsey, in regards to every center out there right now, ECE, whoever you are, you guys are doing a fantastic job. Kennen, I haven't forgot about you. Please come on here. I have one last question before we jump into wrap up. And I also do want to plug you once again about if you want to check out Science with Kennen, please do. But last question, a couple of folks have asked, and this is why I want to ask it, is about what about asymptomatic with COVID and taking the vaccine? Any thoughts around that guy?
Yeah. This is another really great question. And I guess one of the cool things about this is that you guys can act as scientists now, because these are the same questions that scientists are asking. Is this question in regards to specifically, like, if I get the vaccine, do I still have a chance of being asymptomatically infected and maybe passing it? Is that the
I want to say, yeah, let's go with
Okay.
that.
Sure. So a lot of people are asymptomatically infected. In fact, in terms of the number of people, when you look at how many people are infected in the United States, that's multiply that number by about 3, and that's probably how many people have been infected with COVID and just even don't know it. So somewhere around a third of people in the United States have had asymptomatic infection. We don't know necessarily what the long-term effects of that are. Again, these could be doing something to your cardiovascular system, and maybe there's a risk of stroke or dementia or something like that happens down the line. We just don't know. But when it comes to the vaccine, what we're hoping for is that you're going to get those neutralizing antibodies. That's why a lot of these have the 2-dose, right? So what they're looking for, when you look at the science behind this, is they're looking for, when you get naturally infected and you're symptomatic, how many antibodies do you produce? And then if we give you the vaccine, can we get to that level or more? And so all of the vaccines that have been authorized at this point, they've all surpassed that mark of you've had symptomatic infection, which gives you these neutralizing antibodies, because that's how you clear the infection. And so the vaccine is going to give you that. So at least for a window, the hope is that you're going to have neutralizing antibodies, so you
Mhm.
won't have asymptomatic infection. But the thought is, hopefully you got this from the presentation I gave, is that in order for a virus to be affected by the immune system, it has to be inside of you. That's the only way it works. You don't get a vaccine and all of a sudden there's a wall and it's like, it can't get into me. The virus has to get inside. And if it can get into a few cells, if it can just sneak past it, then there's always a chance that it can replicate a little bit before the immune system catches up. And so it is a risk. Only studies will tell, but I'm fairly hopeful and confident that that's going to be a low risk.
Mhm.
And until there's evidence that asymptomatic infection is really dangerous, the key of these vaccines is just to prevent symptomatic infection and hopefully spread. So if you're not going to the hospital, then get the vaccine and you're good to go.
Just stay safe, folks. That's what I want to say. I want to just do another shameless plug about your Instagram. Please, maybe if you have some other questions, ping you directly, Kennen. Is that okay? As I do it, I'm saying it without your nod. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I actually do.
Please.
I'm trying to answer as many questions as I can. But yes, if you have Instagram, DM me. I try to answer them. I've gotten a lot, but I try to keep my inbox cleared out. So email me, or you can email me at sciencewithkennen@gmail.com. And I'm more than happy to answer these questions and give you the most information so that you can make the most educated decision for yourself and your loved ones.
And I think that's the big key takeaway from today is we wanted to make sure to give out as much information as possible so that, going forward, people are loaded with the right facts. But Kennen, any last thoughts, words of wisdom, advice, happy thoughts you want to leave the crew with today as we work into wrap up?
I agree that things are looking better. We made it past the spikes. We've got these vaccines that are out here. People have been infected. I think polls have shown around 60 to 70% of people are willing to get the vaccine, which is really exciting to me. One thing we didn't touch on here is herd immunity. And once we hit a certain threshold, the sooner that people are protected, doesn't even matter if it's asymptomatic. As soon as we don't have hospitals being overwhelmed, we can start getting back to normal, which is what I'm excited for. I
agree with you. I'll be out there. Maybe Kelsey, I might run into you somewhere and have a beer together. You never know. You never know. Or next time in Chicago. First of all, Kennen, Dorit, Kelsey, thank you so much for being here today, for giving us a little bit more education, giving us a little bit more knowledge to arm ourselves with. I've learned so much. I can say for the folks in the chat that it's been absolutely fantastic having all three of you on here. And please, folks, connect with these people. They will love to give you any answers. If you're looking for help, they may even be able to know where to push you in the right direction. So thank you from everyone at Hi Mama for being here. Thank you for everyone on the chat for being here. It's been a pleasure having all three of you folks with us today. So, all right, folks, let's jump into wrap up. As we get wrapped up, if you folks, if you've never heard of Hi Mama, first of all, we got this a couple of chats ago, so I wanted to make sure to cover it moving forward. But if you love us, you're gonna love our app as well. So if you've never looked at us before, where have you been? I'm just joking. Please do check us out. We are the #1 childcare. I can't speak. It's only Thursday. Childcare rated app out there. And I'd love to have you a part of the Hi Mama family if you're not a part of the Hi Mama family. So please do join us. We have so many great features. And I could go on and on and on, but I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time today. So please don't be shy. If you want to talk with anybody here, let me know, or let them know that you talked to me. Okay, that Rhea sent you. I would love for you to connect up with the team. Our team is amazing. We don't just have the fantastic app that we do have, but we also have the amazing team that goes behind it. So this comes from our marketing team, the engineering team, the support team is the people that you'd have the next set of more conversation with. So don't forget, we have tons and tons and tons of resources, not just our lovely webinars. Kaya can attest to the fantastic podcast that we have. And as well, we are a B certified company. So it makes that we're making an impact on the community as a greater whole. So, and that's because of you folks, you fantastic folks. So certificate, I know Kaya's posted it a couple of times. If you haven't had the chance, it will be in the show notes tomorrow. So please watch for your show note email by the end of the day tomorrow. It should be in your inbox. Otherwise it will be, and there it goes in the chat again. It also will be in the show notes blog post. So don't fret if you don't see it right away. And like I said, I know sadly a couple of you, it's just ended up in a very odd place. So please just keep your eye out. I will be sending the recording. I will be sending the show notes from today, and of course, the slides and the certificate as well. Next week, we're talking about being resilient. I'm super excited for next week. A couple of folks have already said that. Oh, thanks, Stace. I'm glad we could share it as well together. We're talking a little bit more about teaching resilience. You know, this is a big piece of it's what we do. You know, it's not, you know, it's something that we as educators, it just come by so naturally. It's a fantastic piece to be sharing and talking a little more about. Before I leave you, please don't be shy. We're having some reruns, folks. This is just to give you guys some insight. I know a lot of you folks have said you can't make the you know, the every Thursday afternoon, so I'd love to have you join us on Tuesdays right now at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this coming up Tuesday. And Kaya, you can go ahead and pop that guy in the chat. It will be talking a little bit more about our Hi Mama feature roundup that we did back in January. We're going to be live on the chat, so that this way you folks can ask some great questions if you weren't able to make it, and we'll also be sending it out once again. So I'm very excited to be running these with Kaya. Last but not least, if you are not already, please follow us on social media. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's our Facebook group, Circle Time, as well. If you're not a part of that, I do recommend signing up. You do need to answer the questions, as well as checking out Hi Mama and just learning a little bit more. So, yep, Joan, we will send out a recording of the session. Kaya, did I forget anything? There's been so much packed into today's session that I feel like I might have missed something.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic session. Thank you everyone for joining us, and super special thank you to all of our amazing panelists for all of your hard work today. Our audience, if you haven't had a second to check out the chat, they're super appreciative of all the amazing information from all different angles. So thank you so much.
I can echo that. From everyone at Hi Mama, thank you once again to all of our panelists who are with us today to give out this great information, and to everybody here joining us today. Stay healthy and stay happy, and we will see you guys next Thursday. Bye, everyone.